They dropped the ball from the get-go. Like, they were alerted as soon as Albert was back on the street.
It's a very warm day. I think we came up with, what, 98 degrees under here and probably 120 up there. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Albert Garcia, a good friend of mine. I get a little, but he would talk about the Bible. He could tell you the story behind the story behind the story. He taught me more about the Bible than anyone. And he knew more about the Bible than anyone I'd ever even thought of. And, people would come to him for advice. People would come to him and say, can you help me do this? Can you pray for me? Etc., etc., etc. And Albert was right there for him. He would help people out. He would do anything for them. Because I kept telling people, man, it seemed really hot this summer. Oh, God.
Oh, yeah. So
I'm 65. I'm surprised I lived through it. I had a heat stroke twice out there on the sidewalk. Yeah.
Okay.
Ambulance had to come and get me.
Okay.
And so I was very aware of how hot it was. And there hasn't been any clouds. I mean, it's been a horrible time to try and get enough money just to eat on. Albert had some things happen to him that kind of affected him. He was a star defensive linebacker for Lanier. Yeah, and I mean, people loved him. He was good. He really was. And he was going out. The head cheerleader, the most beautiful girl in school, was his girlfriend. I mean, Albert had a life right there. And he'd already been scouted by colleges, and he had a life. His girlfriend got hit by a drunk driver, killed in a fiery car wreck. She was killed in a fiery car wreck. Albert saw it.
They were like, oh, we can't find him. What do you mean you can't find them? He's always there. Any of us can find him. It took like 3+ weeks, maybe like at least a minimum of 3 weeks for them to show up to talk to him once. They didn't come to a single one of our meetings, even though they were invited to it. This is a pattern with APS.
If they just cared and not just made it a case. He's not just a number. He was a living, breathing human being with a spirit and a soul and laughter. But because they treat so many people like numbers, They detach themselves from any kind of emotion. It's not right. So, how many more have to die because of these failures of our systems?
We're here today for Albert Garcia, a month of action in his honor, supporting his life and every houseless person that has died from system neglect. We're calling for accountability for APS's role in his death. We're calling for them to actually do something about the abusive caregiver that still remains in the home that Albert fled from. We're calling for APS to give a damn about our houseless relatives and to stop dismissing and ignoring those cases completely every time they come across their desk.
For me, it's been hard to ignore the increasing numbers of homeless that the city's been experiencing since COVID. I see it every day, and so the fact that we have to stand here as a small group of concerned citizens to highlight what is so evident around us, the city really needs to step up its act in taking care of its citizens and providing viable solutions for an increasing problem.
I only met Albert a few times, and during that time I was practicing wound care on him. I was helping keep his wounds clean and dry, and I just want to share some of the stuff I learned about him, because when you're doing that, he was really tough. Like, it was really painful for him, and he was a really good sport, and he had a good attitude about it. He was always a joy to speak to, and like I said, always a really good sport about things, and just kind of a real dude. Like, he just kind of met me where I was at, and I met him where he was at, and it was just like a very easy person to talk to, and talked often about like strategy of football and the different things he did as being a linebacker. And unfortunately, I don't know football well enough to be able to relate all of that, but it's always nice to see somebody talk about a passion, and that's kind of cool. So that's one of the last things that Albert left me with, that kind of light in his eyes, talking about something he really enjoyed. And I think that's beautiful, and I just wanted to share that with y'all to kind of memorialize that moment that I had with him. So thank you.
But I blame this a lack of urgency and a lack of imagination and a lack of political will on the part of those whose jobs it is to respond to these kinds of situations in the city and at the state level. Well, what we know is that of why he ended up back on the street is that a housing situation that had been stable for him shut down, so he went to another assisted living group setting, and the caregiver, something happened. We don't know, because APS didn't investigate or didn't make that public to us. But according to Albert, there was an altercation between the caregiver and another resident, and Albert stepped in. Albert stood up on behalf of the people he was living with, and rather than escalate the situation, he chose to remove himself to get away from that space. And so he came back to the neighborhood, and he would have gone back if the caregiver had been removed. He told us that on a couple different occasions. So he basically lost his life trying to stand up for the people he was living with. He lost his life because of institutional bureaucratic inertia. They should have responded immediately, and they didn't. He lost his life because we have no climate plan that puts the most vulnerable at its center. And we have no resources in the city for people at that level of extreme vulnerability. I mean, I think APS is to blame, because we filed a report immediately, when he left his housing because of the incident with the caregiver. We opened an investigation, and they didn't respond. in a timely way. And also DHS, like the City of San Antonio's Department of Human Services, they they were involved at some level, but not fast enough.
Albert is not my first client with APS. I have had other clients with APS, and it is, they straight out fight you on having to, take any kind of care for our houseless relatives. APS is 100% complicit in Albert Garcia's death. They have blood on their hands, 100%.